Tom, Dave, we're here at the Johnson Space Center. We've just ordered a big collection of Husky bicycles, and we've had a minor quality issue. These Quadro hubs. Yep, sorry about that. And we've been actually getting a squeal when some of them roll. We've contacted the distributor and asked what they wanted us to do, and they said go ahead and grease them yourself. So I'm going to show everyone how to grease loose ball bearings. There's multiple types of bearings you can find on a bicycle. Loose ball is a classic type that isn't found on a whole lot of consumer bicycles anymore, but it's probably the most common type of bearing you'll find on old style bicycles. The next most common on older ones and on some budget ones are bearings that are in these races. The process for taking care of these types of bearings will be almost exactly the same as taking care of the loose ball. The third type of bearing, which we won't be dealing with today, are what they call sealed bearings. And on sealed bearings, the races are built in and you never actually see the balls themselves. Basically on these types of bearings, when they go bad, you just throw them away. Start over. These days, when you find loose ball, loose ball doesn't necessarily mean bad, even though they're not used as much as they used to be. The nice thing about loose ball and why they're still found in industrial bicycles such as these is they are you can maintain them yourself. Unlike sealed bearings, which you just throw away, meaning that in industrial environments where there's likely to be quite a few different types of bearings laying around, you'll usually have spares and workers themselves can take care of them. Right now what I'm doing is I went ahead and took the nut and washers all the way off since I took the wheel all the way off. And there's this rubber seal here, which its purpose is to keep dirt and water out, which will make your bearings last longer.
Uh-oh. What happened? Did I hit a button?
Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, just kind of goes off the screen. Yeah, that's to keep the dirt and water out. Now, something you learn, always try to use the right size wrench. Right now we're going to be dealing with a 17 millimeter. And I'm going to put an adjustable wrench on the back side simply to hold the axle, but it's a bad habit to use adjustable wrenches to do the entire job. And really all you need to do is break over. Yeah, I'm not going to have an easy breakover this time. What's happening, there's a cone nut and a stop nut. The cone nut is coming along with the stop nut. I'll explain the cone nut to you in a moment. I'm going to need to use a cone wrench to break this loose. And the cone wrench is just like any other wrench, only it's very thin, and it's for, as it implies, holding the cone. There we go. Broken retainer nut. Now, you really only have to do one side, since the entire axle is going to come out. First, I've got the retainer off, and usually with the cone, you should be able to just hold it with your fingers. I find it's actually easier to twist the axle. Try not to let the axle fall as you're doing this. You could theoretically lose bearings doing that, and it's no fun chasing bearings. And when I'm actually posting this to YouTube, I can edit out a lot of slow things such as this. Once you get the cone released, then you can pull your axle straight out. Now, part of the quality issue we've had here is that the original manufacturer off of China didn't use the best quality of grease, and it's actually had an audible effect on the wheels as they roll. Now, while doing the previous ones, I found out we had 10 bearings per each side of the hub. So it's important to make sure when you first take it apart that you've got the correct number of bearings. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. While the grease is still on them, they do tend to stick to your fingers. Now, I've only gotten 8 so far, but I did see where it started to go down the hub. Usually all you've got to do is put something on the bearing and the grease will cause it to stick, if you're lucky. Didn't appear to be the case this time. Of course, I've made it through quite a few of these without losing the bearings, and as soon as we start recording the video, guess which ones I lose them on. Did one. This is a spanner wrench that I use on bottom brackets. You can do the same exact operation on a bottom bracket, and if you do, you'll probably need one of these, especially if you've got a loose bottom. Or as the one I showed you earlier was actually a bottom bracket with the track bearings. There we go. What I'm doing here, this retainer is part of the race system. And I'm simply sliding a screwdriver under and prying up one side while pushing. You don't want to put too much stress on any one point or you will bend it and ruin it, in which case you will need to go and get yourself a new one. And these aren't normally sold at the average parts store, so let's just say you don't want to destroy it. Hit the floor. The nice thing about when you first take them out, when they're still covered in grease, they hit the floor, they usually stay in one place. If you clean them, they'll roll all over the place. Okay. When re-greasing your bearings, it's important to get the old grease out. The old grease traps dirt and debris and significantly lowers the lifespan of your parts. And one thing you'll notice as I go through this operation is that I am meticulous about removing grease from everything. It doesn't have to be 100%, you don't have to go get a steam cleaner, but you don't want to mix two different types of grease, and you definitely don't want the old stuff with all the dirt left behind. Okay, I've got
Right in there.
I'm going to do a bearing check. I should have 20 bearings. 6, 7, 8, 9. I do have 20 bearings. I've got my cups clean. This is called a cup and cone system. The inside of the hub is what's called a cup. There's a slight concave, which you probably won't be able to see on the video. And of course, we've already discussed the cone a little bit, and the reason I call it a cone, I just got a little bit of a cone shape. And I'll explain that to you a little bit more when we start to put it all back together. Now, when re-greasing your hub, you get yourself some grease. This is a multi-purpose grease. This one actually says it's good for nautical use and on farm equipment. I chose not to get the high temperature variant. There's always a trade-off of some sort. And on a bicycle, you're never going to hit a need for a high temperature application. So I figured I'd get the regular low temperature, so I'd have the better lubrication. I honestly don't know if the high temperature has less lubrication, but if there's a trade-off, I figured I'd be on the safe side. I asked my dad if it's the right kind, and he's been an oil man for 35 years. So he says yes, I'm going with it. Alright. I've greased up one side, and even though grease is slick, it is also sticky. So that's going to be very important when you're doing this operation. One at a time, I'm removing the bearings from my holding cup, and I'm polishing the balls in the rack. If you got someone else with you, you can always get them to polish your balls for you. Alright, so one at a time, I will polish the bearings until I get 10 placed in, and they will stick to the grease inside the rack, inside the race. And this is going to be a point where I'm pretty much going to fast forward in post-production. I made myself a nice little video the other day of putting hand grips on with zip ties. I figured I'll just start making a collection. I've had a YouTube account for years, and I've uploaded very little to it. Just dropped another one in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we've up to bearing 10, which I'm putting in place, plus bearing 11 that I dropped in inside the hub. Notice the grease is holding them nice and tight like they should be. Like it should be. So I'm simply going to turn it over. I was sticking the axle through to make sure all the bearings are held in place, but I found that to be an unnecessary operation. Right now I'm simply going after the bearing that dropped down the middle of the hub. It's too bad I can always put a cone on to hold it in place. Matter of fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put the cone right here to hold these bearings, so I can dive in after the one I've dropped. You know, you have no idea how many of these I did without dropping a single bearing down the middle. Alright, the Rogue has been retrieved. And this side is just like the other. Taking a dab of grease, sticking it inside the cup, running it around, and there's no such thing as getting too much. I mean, any extra grease you get will just go down inside the hub, grease the axle, and it might even work its way back out to the bearings eventually. So don't worry about getting too much. The only disadvantage to too much is the additional weight, and if you're running loose ball bearings, I don't think weight's usually your chief concern. If all the instructions I'm giving you, this isn't limited to just a front wheel. You can use this technique on bottom brackets, on headsets. You can use them on your car, this technique on your car. or anything else you might have that has bearings that need greasing. One thing important to notice is I am working on a front wheel here, and front wheels are in comparison much easier than rear wheels. The front wheels are almost always going to have the same size bearings on both sides. They're going to be symmetrical. When you start dealing with rear wheels, you may run into some asymmetry, such as Eastern's Venus hub, where it's got 4 rows of bearings on the inside for coasting on the axle. It's got a row of bearings and then 2 different rows of bearings for the ratcheting mechanism. And trust me, you're going to want to be able to keep those separate. And on a front wheel, you're usually pretty safe, just assuming everything's going to be the same size. At least if you lose bearings, you can usually get replacements at any machine or bicycle shop. Okay, I'm up to 10 on both sides. The next step are these retainers. And notice it's still got the nasty Vaseline looking grease that came with it. Wiping that off, both inside and the flat surface, just like I've done with everything else. And I'm taking a small little dab of grease, and I'm just coating the surface. It's a good idea to go ahead and coat this. If you miss it, don't worry, the balls will usually smear extra grease up onto it. But there we go. It's a good idea for the idling situation. And remember, it's symmetry, so we've got it on both sides. I want to make sure all your bearings are still out. I haven't had one fall out yet after I got it set in place in the grease. Push it in, nothing special, just make sure it goes down in there. Now, this is where it's going to get interesting. Now you notice, this bicycle has been ridden before, but all the threads are still on the axle. The reason being, you never want the bearings actually coasting on the axle itself. That's what the cone is for. Cup shape on the inside of the cup area and the cone create a cylinder, a continuous cylinder these bearings coast in. So it never actually rides on an axle despite what you might think. And just like everything else, put a small amount of grease on the outside of the cup, reinsert it straight in until it reaches the other side. Flip it over, and I like to put it on the surface of a holder so I still get to use my hands. I'm going to do the same thing with the other cone. And then I'm going to finger tighten. This is where a little bit of skill is going to be needed. Because this is what makes or breaks the operation. Remember the continuous tube I was talking about? Well, if you over-tighten your cone, the wheel won't roll. Just want to keep tightening the cone. You want to tighten the cone until it gets situated inside of a hub. And I got enough grease where it makes it difficult to hold on to. Good job. Bigger the blob, better the job. Alright. You want to keep twisting until about the point that you don't want to put any force on it, just about the time that it stops spinning on its own. You make sure the axle still rotates freely. Get your retention piece, put it on, and this is where it's easy to make a mistake. If you don't know what you're doing, your first instinct is to put it on the same way you took it off. Grab the crescent wrench on one side, get the 17 millimeter on the other. That would be the incorrect way to do it. This is what the cone wrench is for. If you don't have a cone wrench, you might be able to make it work with needle nose. Depending on the way your bike's designed, you might be able to snake in a smaller or a thinner wrench. But really, it's a really good idea to have the proper tool for this particular job. We call it a cone wrench because it fits right there on the cone. And you tighten the retention nut against the cone nut, not against the nut on the other side. And since we applied pressure to both sides when we took it off, we want to go ahead and make sure both sides are tight. I haven't had a case where this has come loose yet, but it's better safe than sorry. Don't forget to put your rubber grommets back on. And it's a good idea to wipe excess grease off the outside of your wheel or outside of the bushing, because grease on the outside attracts dirt and it sticks. It just makes your bike look messy. Make sure the bushings aren't bent at any one corner. Get your washer started. If you've only got teeth on one side of the washer, make sure that the side with the teeth goes towards the inside. My washers happen to have teeth on both sides, so it doesn't really matter. Those teeth are part of what helps to hold it to the frame, and you really don't want a wheel coming off if you're doing the wheelie. You always want to tighten your nuts before you spin the wheel so that you don't put undue wear on your axle. In my case, I've got to watch and make sure the nut's not stuck under one of the basket arms of the fenders. Tighten it down. Give it a whirl. We've got a good loop job going on. And you can go ahead and move the bike.